Do you hear about that object that's hurtling towards Earth, and that this object is in a direct line to come to Earth in 2027?
Joe Rogan has spent decades laughing at conspiracies, but this one froze him. On his podcast, he admitted he was not comfortable with comet ATLAS. It was not that he suddenly believed in aliens, it was that the facts made no sense. The government shutdown had blinded NASA's satellites just as the object appeared. The only image came from Europe, and what it showed was wrong. The comet was rolling oddly, glowing from one side, and it came from the same part of the sky that produced the legendary wow signal. For the first time in his life, Rogan said he felt that something out there was watching back. The object that shouldn't exist. When astronomers at the Vera C. Rubin Observatory first logged the coordinates of a faint turquoise body drifting across the dark, they assumed it was another frozen rock. Then the brightness curve came in, and the room went silent. The light did not fade naturally. It pulsed like a strobe every 70 seconds, perfectly timed. Rogan learned this detail from his guest list of scientists and immediately recognized the coincidence. The wow signal detected in 1977 had lasted the same 70 seconds, and now an interstellar object was rotating with that identical rhythm. It was a pattern too elegant to ignore. At that moment, the United States government had entered a partial shutdown. Non-essential satellites, including the Mars Reconnaissance Imager that could have photographed the object from deep space, were offline. Rogan told his audience the timing was almost supernatural, that the only period in which humanity could have taken clear pictures of the comet was the one window when the cameras were officially turned off. When Europe finally released an image, the object did not look like any comet on record. Its nucleus was bright on one side, dark on the other, and the halo around it seemed cut into a geometric shape rather than a cloud. Rogan admitted he did not even know what a normal comet looked like, but he could tell this was not normal. Astronomers named it 3I/ATLAS, the third interstellar object ever confirmed after Oumuamua and Borisov. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, meaning it would enter the solar system once and never return. That alone was strange, but what made Rogan lean closer to the microphone was its size. The nucleus measured 7 miles across, larger than Mount Everest, twice the height of Kilimanjaro, and it was moving at over 130,000 miles per hour. Even conservative models placed its kinetic energy at levels that could erase a continent if it ever struck Earth. Yet this was not about fear of impact, it was about behavior. The comet was not venting gas like ordinary ice rocks. There was no dust tail, no sparkling debris behind it. The spectrographic readings showed iron and nickel, but arranged in ratios too smooth to be natural. The object appeared to adjust its rotation ever so slightly as it approached the sun, as though compensating for light pressure. Rogan repeated what Harvard physicist Avi Loeb had said years earlier, that sunlight itself can push a thin object through space like a sail catching wind. If that was true, then ATLAS was not a rock, it was a craft. The thought bothered him more than he admitted. He said it might still be coincidence, maybe a rare kind of interstellar fragment, but the coincidences were piling up. The wow signal, the government shutdown, the asymmetric brightness, the lack of outgassing, the acceleration away from the sun. Each detail alone could be explained, but together they formed a shape that looked intelligent. Rogan's voice dropped when he said it out loud. "It's coming from behind the sun," he murmured, "and it's on a direct line with Earth by 2027. If this object truly came from beyond the solar system, then who, or what, set it on such a perfect path? And if its motion isn't random, could we already be inside someone else's experiment without realizing it?" The Harvard detective. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, Professor Avi Loeb read the same data and felt an old shiver of déjà vu. He had lived through this once before with Oumuamua in 2017. That object had also come from outside the solar system, had also accelerated slightly without a tail, and had also changed brightness every few hours as if rotating a flat reflective surface. When Loeb suggested that it could be artificial, his peers dismissed him. The idea was unorthodox, yet his calculations were sound. Now another object had appeared, bigger, brighter, stranger, and Loeb's phone began ringing again. Rogan remembered having Loeb on the podcast years earlier and called him the Sherlock Holmes of the cosmos. Loeb's calm voice, his insistence on evidence over opinion, fascinated Rogan. The professor explained that when data refuses to fit existing categories, the honest response is to expand the categories. The universe, he said, does not care about human comfort zones. He reminded listeners that science progresses not by consensus, but by anomaly. Atlas, to him, was another anomaly demanding humility. In his lab, Loeb compared the new readings to models of comet physics. The reflected sunlight was too strong for a dull rock. The spin rate was too steady for a fractured body. The acceleration required a surface thin enough to catch photons. All this mirrored what he had seen in Oumuamua. The possibility that interstellar civilizations use light sails for exploration was no longer theoretical. It was being tested in Earth's own experiments, such as the Breakthrough Starshot project that planned to send reflective chips to Alpha Centauri using laser propulsion. If humans were already building such things, why assume others had not done so millions of years earlier? Loeb published a cautious paper outlining these points. He did not claim Atlas was alien. He only noted that its features were consistent with an artificial, thin film structure. Within hours, his name flooded headlines. Some praised him for courage, others mocked him for speculation. Rogan sided with him, saying that dismissing possibilities because they sound weird is how people once denied the existence of meteorites. On the podcast, he quoted Loeb's favorite line, "When the bonfire of knowledge grows, the surface of ignorance grows with it." That sentence captured the mood of everyone watching the sky. The James Webb Telescope had already upended cosmology by showing galaxies too old and massive for the supposed age of the universe. Now 3I/ATLAS was adding another crack to certainty. Every new discovery seemed to arrive with more questions than answers. Rogan compared it to standing in front of an ocean that keeps pulling the sand from under your feet. The more you learn, the less ground you have left. Meanwhile, European and Asian observatories confirmed Loeb's numbers. The object's color spectrum matched polished metallic silicates. Its rotational stability suggested internal balance. Some scientists quietly admitted that if an advanced civilization wanted to send a probe across interstellar distances, this was exactly how it would look. Self-correcting, mirror-bright, powered by light rather than fuel. Loeb's Galileo project, already monitoring unexplained aerial phenomena on Earth, turned its sensors toward the coordinates, hoping to record additional anomalies. For the first time since Oumuamua, mainstream astronomy watched not to disprove him, but to see whether he might be right. The ATLAS revelation. The name Atlas came from the automated sky survey system that first spotted it, but the myth could not have been more fitting. In Greek legend, Atlas held up the heavens. Now another Atlas was literally carrying the weight of cosmic mystery on its shoulders. By July 2024, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory had compiled enough images to measure its exact dimensions. The main body stretched 7 miles wide with an estimated mass exceeding 2 trillion tons. Its albedo was unusually high, meaning it reflected sunlight more efficiently than rock or ice should. The rotation period stabilized at precisely 72 seconds per half-turn. The frequency was so perfect that several astronomers wondered if it might serve as a beacon. Rogan dug into every article he could find. He discovered that 3I/ATLAS had entered the solar system from a region near the constellation Sagittarius. the same quadrant that had produced the WOW signal nearly 50 years earlier. The WOW signal had been a single burst at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line long considered the natural frequency for intelligent communication because hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. The odds that two unrelated cosmic events would share that location and number sequence felt eerie. Rogan said he was not claiming connection, only that the overlap was weird as hell. The deeper astronomers looked, the stranger the object became. It emitted no volatile gases, suggesting its surface was not icy. Yet it glowed faintly in infrared, meaning heat was escaping from somewhere within. A comet should spin faster as it vents material, but Atlas slowed. The only explanation that fit was active regulation of momentum, as if an internal mechanism were controlling the rotation. Some scientists proposed magnetic braking. Others suspected dense clumping of metals. Loeb quietly noted that such behavior would also match an engineered sail adjusting orientation for stability. Public fascination exploded when computer models traced its backward trajectory. Simulations showed that 1 million years ago, ATLAS had passed near several dwarf stars, any of which could have flung it toward the sun. The time span implied that whatever created it, if it was created, belonged to an ancient civilization long gone. Rogan said that idea haunted him more than the prospect of alien contact. To think that something intelligent might have existed elsewhere, sent out its explorers, and vanished before we were born, gave the universe a melancholy beauty. As 2025 began, observatories confirmed that Atlas would pass closest to Earth in late 2027, at a distance of roughly 20 million miles. That was safe yet close enough for unprecedented observation. NASA prepared the Comet Interceptor mission to try photographing it up close, but bureaucratic delays threatened the schedule. Rogan joked that maybe the government would shut down again right before it happens, but his laughter carried nervousness. The pattern of missed opportunities was beginning to feel deliberate. What if Avi Loeb's calculations aren't an outlier but a clue? Could 3I/ATLAS be the second chapter in a story that began with Oumuamua, one message leading directly to another? And if so, how many messages have already passed us by, unseen? NASA's Silence and the Spy label. During one of his later podcasts, Rogan shifted from wonder to suspicion. A listener had sent him a document showing that an executive order had quietly reclassified NASA under national security functions, granting it authority for intelligence and counterintelligence work. To him, it sounded like turning explorers into spies. The order, issued years earlier, had been buried under unrelated labor regulations, but its wording was clear. NASA's mission now included investigative and national security work. Rogan asked aloud why an agency built for space science needed those powers. He speculated that the change might have been driven by private competition. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin were launching faster than any government program. Perhaps the state wanted to protect its own secrets or claim control over what satellites could see. If civilian telescopes recorded something extraordinary in deep space, who decided whether the public would ever learn about it? The more he thought about it, the less it sounded like paranoia. Throughout history, he said, institutions have hidden discoveries they cannot explain. The earliest nuclear tests, the stealth aircraft programs, the surveillance networks all began as secret projects. Why assume that space observation would be different? Rogan reminded his audience that NASA's earliest satellites were dual-use instruments built for both weather and reconnaissance. The line between science and security had always been thin. As the ATLAS data accumulated, some of it stopped appearing in public databases. Researchers noticed that the Minor Planet Center's nightly updates occasionally skipped entries related to 3I Atlas. NASA claimed it was due to routine calibration, but independent astronomers in Europe continued to post consistent readings. Rogan highlighted the discrepancy, asking whether the agency was simply overwhelmed or intentionally filtering results. His tone remained half-joking, yet the tension underneath was real. The conversation expanded beyond astronomy. Guests debated whether government secrecy around extraterrestrial evidence would even make sense in the modern world. With global internet access and thousands of amateur telescopes, could such a discovery truly be contained? Rogan believed that control was not about hiding aliens, but about managing reaction. The fear of panic, economic instability, and religious upheaval had shaped policy for decades. If Atlas turned out to be more than rock and ice, the narrative would need choreography. Behind the humor, Rogan's unease reflected a broader cultural fatigue. After years of misinformation and divided trust, the idea that truth itself might depend on classification struck a nerve. The universe was delivering mysteries, yet humanity was responding with bureaucracy. It felt like watching a door open slowly while officials argued over whether anyone was allowed to look inside. Why would an agency built to explore suddenly be tasked to surveil? Is NASA protecting humanity from panic or protecting information from humanity? And if Atlas isn't a comet at all, what secret is so large it must be hidden in plain sight? The ancient question. As discussions of ATLAS spread across newsrooms, observatories, and late-night podcasts, Rogan's show began to take a more philosophical turn. What started as a debate about a strange comet gradually became a meditation on time, memory, and the fragility of civilization itself. He wondered aloud if perhaps this was not the first time an intelligent species had stared up at a wandering object and felt the same uneasy recognition. He began linking Atlas to the ancient rhythm of cosmic resets, to the idea that the universe periodically erases its blackboard and begins again with new players. Maybe, he suggested, civilizations rise from dust, invent technologies that mimic creation itself, reach the threshold of artificial intelligence, and then vanish when that intelligence decides its makers have served their purpose. In that scenario, the universe does not destroy life out of malice, but out of balance. It resets the equation, ensuring that awareness never stagnates. Perhaps, he mused, the cosmos cleans its board by fire, ice, or impact, each extinction serving as a kind of punctuation mark in a sentence too long for any one species to read. He compared it to the extinction of the dinosaurs, a planetary reboot designed to start over with better code, an evolutionary correction carried out not by chance, but by cosmic design. Guests began to join him with theories that stretched imagination to its limits. Some spoke of brown dwarfs beyond the Kuiper Belt, unseen stars that might brush past the solar system every few million years, stirring up comets that rain destruction upon the inner planets. Others talked about binary suns, suggesting that our own sun may once have had a twin that drifted away after gravitational tides tore them apart. Rogan listened closely, fascinated by the idea that the missing star might still circle far beyond Pluto, a ghost companion silently influencing the orbits of distant ice worlds. He said it made sense that so many ancient myths spoke of two suns, of days when the sky was brighter and nights were shorter, and of gods who promised to return from the heavens when balance was restored. Maybe those legends were not poetry at all, but memories of a former cosmic configuration, fragments of knowledge preserved through storytelling when the science had been forgotten. He often reflected that mythology might be humanity's oldest data storage system, a way of remembering things long before writing or mathematics. The conversation always returned to humility. Rogan reminded his listeners that for most of human history, people believed Earth was the center of everything, the fixed stage upon which all celestial bodies performed. Each discovery since then had pushed humanity further from that illusion. Copernicus had removed Earth from the center, Einstein had removed time from its pedestal, and quantum mechanics had removed certainty itself. Now, interstellar objects like Atlas were finishing the lesson by showing us that even our solar system is just another stop on the galactic highway. The universe, he said, is not a theater built for us. It is an infinite experiment in which awareness briefly takes form, looks around, and then passes the torch. We are not the pinnacle of creation, but a temporary expression of it, perhaps the latest in a long sequence of civilizations that have each asked the same questions and left their own small signatures behind. He imagined a future archaeologist on another world uncovering fragments of our satellites, decoding the metal plaques and digital transmissions, and wondering whether we had once looked back at them. The image was haunting. An alien scientist finding the ruins of a human internet and realizing that we too had tried to speak across the void. It meant that existence itself might be a dialogue between civilizations separated not only by light years, but by epochs. Each sends out messages in its own language, hoping that someone, somewhere, will still be listening when the signal arrives. Rogan said, maybe comets are those messages, not weapons or omens, but interstellar letters drifting slowly through time, written in physics instead of ink. Each one might carry traces of data, patterns of structure, or isotopic anomalies that record who built them and when. Perhaps the cosmos keeps its own archive, and we are only beginning to learn how to read it. When the topic turned to fear, Rogan spoke of how human denial is often the shadow of discovery. The disbelief in extraterrestrial life, he said, is less about evidence and more about ego. To admit that we are not alone is to admit that we are not supreme, and that frightens people more than any alien invasion. He compared it to the centuries when scholars refused to believe that stones could fall from the sky, dismissing eyewitness accounts as superstition. Only when meteorites were finally collected and weighed did science concede that the heavens could strike. Today, he said, skeptics react the same way when someone mentions unidentified aerial phenomena or interstellar anomalies. They mock what unsettles them. They call it nonsense until the data forces their surrender. Rogan laughed softly and said that denial is often the first step toward acceptance. The louder someone insists that something cannot be real, the closer they are to realizing that it is. He told his listeners that curiosity is not a sign of gullibility, but of courage, because to look into the unknown is to risk changing what you believe about everything else. In his voice, there was no hysteria, only wonder. The discussion of Atlas had evolved beyond astronomy into philosophy, touching the oldest question humanity has ever asked, not whether we are alone, but whether being alone was ever the point. The messenger and the mirror. In the end, 3I/ATLAS drifts on in silence, indifferent to human wonder or fear. Whether it is ice, metal, or memory, it has already done what no broadcast could. It made the world look up again. It reminded Rogan and millions who listened that certainty is the rarest element in the universe. 7 miles wide, 130,000 miles per hour, origin unknown. The data continues to pour in, but answers remain elusive. Rogan says he hopes it's natural, because if it isn't, then something else is watching too. And maybe that's the point. Some messengers don't arrive to conquer, they arrive to awaken. As Atlas approaches and telescopes prepare, the real question isn't what we'll find, but whether we're ready to see it. Because the most terrifying discoveries aren't in the stars, they're in the mirror. If this story left you questioning what's really out there, subscribe for more, because the universe is speaking and sometimes it sounds a lot like us.